Hi everyone and welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to go more in depth into the scripts of TCG engine to show you how you can change the gameplay rules and adapt it for your own game. Because as I said in the demo, has a very specific set of game rules, and I know a lot of you want to change that to adapt it more to something that is maybe a more unique gameplay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just import the asset, TCG engine. And then I'm just going to make sure that everything is working correctly. Seems to be working well. So now we're going to go ahead and start changing the scripts to adapt the game to our own rules. Going to open the game scene to be able to test things faster. And then I'm going to open the scripts in the Visual Studio. The best place to start in the script when you want to change core game rules is in this folder, Game Logic, especially the scripts game and then Game Logic. This is where most of the core gameplay is located, so I'm going to open this one. So the difference between these two scripts is that this one contains the state of the game, the current state of the game that is sent through the network from the server to the client. But it also contains different functions that can be called from both the client and the server to check if an action is possible. So inside this script, you should have various functions like can play card, can move card. So basically that check if a specific action is possible, and then it can be called from both the client and the server so that both can validate the action before doing it. And then the game logic is actually executing the action. So this one usually only happens on the server side, and you will have function like damaging a card or destroying a card. What happens when you play a card or when you move a card, when you cast a activated ability or when you want to attack. So all the game logic of what happens when you perform those actions is here. So the first thing that we're going to try to do is to change the behavior of artifacts cards. If you go in cards, find one of the town, they are all artifact. Going to change the behavior of that. And we're also going to add more board slot here on the board so that we can play more than 5 cards at once. So one thing that you can do before changing the game scene is if you want to keep a backup of the template, you can just duplicate it with Ctrl+D. So this is the scene file. I'm just going to call this my game and open this one instead. Make sure it's open here so you're not exiting this one. And then one thing that you will want to change is in resources, gameplay data. Then if you go in scenes arena list, you will want to change this here so that it launches the right scene from the menu. And then in build setting, you can also add your scene, and you can potentially just remove that one. So now in this one, I'm going to add one additional board slot on each side, but there's not a lot of space, so I'm going to try to move things around first. Maybe I just move everything a bit to the left. And then I'm going to add one more here. So this board slot, you can basically place them how you want, and that's where the cards will appear when you play the game. I'm going to move this, maybe make a bit less space in between each one so that we can fit more. So now the game logic will not recognize the last two here, because they are not considered valid. So these last two here, we will need to change the value because we don't want to have two board slots that are the same. Right now, if I click on this one and this one, they both have the same values here. So there's no difference between these two, so the game cannot differentiate them. So for the last one, I'm just going to add 6. And since these are really just the visual and display side of things, the game logic right now is not aware of those board slots existing. So another thing that we will need to change is in the scripts game logic folder. And then if you click on slot.cs, here you can see there's a minimum and a maximum for the X value. So we're just going to change this to 6. Now if I start the game, I should be able to play on those. Let's try it. So now they all appear. And yeah, they are the last one is also valid. So now I can play 6 cards. Now the next thing that I want to change is change the behavior of artifacts. And we're going to reserve this last one here just for artifacts, and the 5 others are going to be for characters. So the way that we're going to change this is if we go in game.cs, there's a function called canPlayCard, and here we're going to check if it's the last one, then it can only be an artifact, and if it's not, then it can only be a character. So if you try to understand a bit the logic here, there's many different conditions that will return false, which means that this card cannot be played on this slot. But when it's returned true, that means that it's possible. So if you look at isBoard card here and you go to the definition, you can see that this is just a shortcut to say that it's either a character or an artifact, because that's are the ones that are on the board. So we'll probably want to put our new condition inside here. So what I'm going to write is if card data type is an artifact and slot X is not equal to 6, then return false. Because artifacts, we only want them to be on the last one, which is value number 6 that we set here. And I'm going to do the same things for characters, but instead it's going to be equal 6, because characters can be on any other squares except the last one. So if it's the last one, then it will return false. And then to make testing easier, by the way, when you launch the game directly from the game scene, it's going to use the deck that you set in gameplay data test deck. But right now that deck doesn't have a lot of artifacts, so we're going to add one. We're going to add a lot of them. I'm going to add the town forest and then change this value to 100. So now if you check, the last 20 cards are all the artifacts, so it will make it much easier. Otherwise there's not enough artifacts in the deck to test it. So now normally if I drag a character, it should not highlight the last one, because for the highlight it's using the same function. That's why it's useful to have this function in game.cs and not GameLogic, because GameLogic is really just a server-side thing. But sometimes for the condition, we want to access it from the client for visual things like this. This is also checking canPlayCard, and since I cannot play the card here, it's not highlighting it. So this one should be able to be played here. And then the forest, it should be the opposite. It should only be able to play it here, but not in any of the other one. We'll test it next turn because I don't have any more mana. So now let's test it. And as you can see, even the opponent plays it here. So when I drag it, I can see I can only play it here, and anywhere else it will not work. But the problem is that after I played it there, now you will see you will be able to move them, which is a problem. So we're also going to add the condition inside canMoveCard. So right now we have the condition inside canPlayCard, but we also need to check the same thing inside canMoveCard. So I'm just going to add these here at the end. So now let's test again. Now I will want to play this one, and the next turn I will check if I'm able to move it here. I should not be able to. And no, I can't. So now this is working properly. You've probably noticed in the game that moving a card doesn't cost an action. You can just move it indefinitely. And the reason why I did that in the demo is because the location of a card doesn't really matter based on card abilities, attacks and effects and all that. So I just let it play or reorganize things like they want. But in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to change that and make it so that moving a card is actually in action. So you cannot both move and attack in the same turn. So again, we're going to go in the canMoveCard condition here. And we're going to make sure that the card is not exhausted. The concept of exhausted is a bit like in other games, sometimes it's called tapped. So if you go into card.cs, which contains the state of a specific card, you can see there's a bool exhausted here. So I'm going to go into can move card and I'm going to add a condition here. If card is exhausted, return false. That means after it has done an action, it cannot move. And then the other thing that we will want to change is that after you move a card, then it becomes exhausted. This will be in game logic because this is actually changing the state of the game. It's not just checking for if something is possible or not. So I'm going to go into game logic, and then if you check the gameplay action, there should be one for moving cards. This one here. And then even have some commented code here, like you can just uncomment. So I'm going to say that the card become exhausted. So as you can see here, it's checking the condition from the other script. You can also add it to history if you want. The history is the square that you can see here. So right now when you're moving a card, it doesn't appear because it doesn't really matter, but now we want it to. So let's go and test this. Let's play any card. And then I can see that I can attack or I can move. But now if I move, I should not be able to attack anymore because I have no more action. I finished my turn with this card. The other thing that I want to change in the can move card function is that I don't want artifact to be able to move. So here previously I've just copied the condition from can play card, but maybe in my game logic I want artifact to just stay where they are forever. So I'm just going to instead return false whenever it's an artifact. So this one can never move, they just stay where they are. Okay, so now we've already changed a couple things. We have a specific board position for artifacts, and artifacts are just not able to move, and moving costs an action for characters. The next thing that we're going to look into is how to add new card stats. So right now there's 3 stats in the game. You have the mana, attack, and HP. We are going to add also armor and range. So when you go in resources cards and select any of the cards that exist, you can see there's different stats and attributes that you can change. And if we want to add a new stat, we need to change the script here, card data. But there's actually 2 ways that you can add a new stat. So there's a system in the engine that lets you add custom stats here. And you can add that to any card. But you can also just add a new field so that you see it like the other basic stat like here. So to show you both example, I'm going to add the range as a default stat here under these 3, but the armor is going to be a custom stat. And the reason why I'm doing that is because probably the range I will want to set it for all the cards in the game, but the armor maybe just a few specific cards will have it. By the way, the armor mechanic already exists in the game, but it's a status, you can see here. So when you have the armor status, you receive less damage from attacks. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to change this to a stat instead of a status so that you can see how you can add a new custom stat. So first let's create this custom stat, and the way that they work is by using traits. I'm just going to go in the traits folder and then duplicate any of the things I have here. I'm going to call this armor, and then I'm going to give it an ID and a title. And then if I go on one of the cards, say I select the fire chicken, then I can just add the armor stat and set a value to 1. So this one, I don't need to change the card data scripts because I use the custom stat system, so I can just add it here and then set the value that I want. And then this one will not do anything right now because it's just the actual stat, but we didn't change the game logic to have an effect. So we're going to go back in the scripts, and then we're going to find inside game logic, we're going to find when an attack happens. So resolve attack hit, this one, the one that targets a card, not the one that targets a player. And then there should be a function inside here that is called damage card. So I'm going to go to this definition, And then as you can see, the armor status is affected here. So we're just going to do the same thing, but for the stat. So I'm going to write if target as trait armor, then the value will be reduced by trait value, and then the trait is this one. And the reason why I have mat.max here is because I never want to reduce the amount of damage below 0. I don't want the armor to heal you when you have more armor than the attack. So that's it for the armor. Now it should already work. I don't think there's anything else that you need to add. We're going to test it later, but first we're going to also add the range stat. This one we're going to do it the other way. So I'm going to open the card data. So this second way is a bit more complex, but in the long term, I think it may be easier to work with, because when you click on a card, you just directly see all the stats that you can change, and you don't have to like open each individual menu to see what's attached to a card. So there can be advantages to both. So inside carddata.cs, I'm going to find where the other stats are so that they are organized together. And here I'm going to add a public variable that will be called range. One thing that you can do is set a default value, so that if you don't want to change it manually on each card, and you know that almost all the cards in the game will have a range of 1, then you can just set a default value. Now if I go back to Unity, it should appear here. Okay, so now if I click on any cards in the resource folder, I can see that they all have a range of 1. Let's select a few cards that will have more range. Maybe the imp has 2 range instead. Maybe the phoenix has 3. And then I'm just going to go in the test deck and going to add a lot of the cards I want to test. So I want to test the imp because it has more range. And I also want to test the fire chicken because it has the armor. So now we haven't actually coded anything about the range. So I'm going to go into game.cs, and then we're going to check at the can attack target. If the card is trying to attack the player, we just consider that this is a range of 1, so they can always do it. So we're not going to change anything here. But if it's attacking a card, then it needs to be within the range to be able to attack it. So if it's in front, then it will be considered range 0. If it's diagonal, then it will be 1. And then, so if your card is here, then this will be 2, 3, 4 range. So we're going to change the condition here in can attack target to take into account the range of each card. So I'm going to add a new line. And then now we're going to compare where each card is and the range between those two things. So what we can do is get the attacker X position, which is this, and then we can get the target X position, which is this. And then we will just do if going to do the absolute because I want a positive value, not a negative value, and then just check the difference between the two. If it's smaller or equal, then the attacker range. Right now it's inside the card data, it's not inside the card.cs script, so I can do .cardData.range and then return false. So basically here it's checking the difference between the two. If it's -1 or if it's 1, it will just change it to the absolute value. So if it's -1, it will change it to 1. And then the distance between the two will be compared to the range of the attacker. It's actually not less or equal, but higher, because I'm returning false here. So this is the condition where I'm not able to attack. So if the distance is higher than the range, then I return false, so I'm not able to attack. So let's try this. Okay, we're going to try this one. This one should have a range of 1, so I should not be able to attack this here. And I should also have an armor of 1. Now I can't. This one has stun, so I can also attack this. I'm going to put this one here, so now this should be in range. Yes, they are. So right now it's not displayed. We're going to do that later, but for now we're just going to remember that this one have a range of 2. Every other regular card should have a range of only 1. So I'm going to play it here so that this one cannot attack me. Also, these 2 cards should have an armor of 1. So if they attack each other, yeah, nothing should happen because the damage is reduced by 1. So now I know that I can attack these 2. Let's try this. As you can see, this one is out of range, so right now I cannot attack it, but I should be able to attack this one. Yeah, and now this is within a range of 2, so I should be able to attack it. Let's try. Yeah, this is working, but my attack was only 1 because of this card, and then the armor removed this. This one has an attack of 2, so it should be able to destroy it even though it has the armor. So now everything seems to work, but we're not displaying the armor and we're also not displaying the range, which can be quite confusing. So we're going to add this. We're going to take care of the visual sides of things now. So to do that, we're going to go into prefabs, gameplay, and then this is the cards that we will want to change, end card and then board card. I'm just going to create a new prefab so that we can keep the original one. Going to duplicate this and then duplicate this. And now we need to link them to the correct place in the game. I think the board card is set on the board here. Instead, I'm just going to change this one. And then the end area should have the end card, yeah. So now let's open this one. Can just hide this for now because we want to be able to see what we're working with. We actually already have an armor icon, but right now it's being used for the status. We're going to change this to the new stat, custom stat that we've created. But for the range, we're going to need to add a completely new field. So I'm going to duplicate this one. Going to call it range icon. And then call this one range. Going to move this up. Maybe I want the range to be a bit smaller. I'm just going to do it like this. And then the value also smaller. Going to click on the card UI here, open the script. And then I'm going to add the range icon and also the range text. Now I'm going to go in the set card, the one that send the card data, not the one that send the card, because this is for stats that are being changed during the game, not the cards that are, the stats are fixed. And right now inside card CS we don't even have a range, so there's no point of doing that, but later I'll show you how to add it there too, so you can have abilities that affect it. So I'm just going to copy this line and also these 2 lines. Replace this with range. I'm also always checking if it's null because we have different prefabs that use the same script and they don't all show the same stats, so sometimes it's best to just check if it's null before you try to change it. And the first one, I wanted to put the icon, not the text value. And then here I'm just going to say range more than 1. So if it's 1, it's the default value, so I just don't want to display it. And if it's higher than 1, then I want to show it. And then for the armor, I think the armor I set it directly on the board card because I usually don't show it anywhere else since it was a status, but we can go and add it on the card UI instead. So I'm just going to also change armor icon and then armor text. We're going to do the same thing here. Armor. So this one I want to show it if it's higher than 0 instead, because the default value is 0. I don't have the armor stat, so I'm going to go get stat, call it armor. Then I can just do the same for these. Now if I go back to my prefab, I just need to link all the new fields that I've added. So here I have the range icon, the armor icon, and then armor value and range value. And right now the armor is also linked here for the status, but I'm just going to remove that part of the code because I don't want the two scripts to conflict to each other. So I'm just going to remove this for now. Comment. Okay, let's try this. I don't have anything with any specific stat for now, so I'm going to restart it, but the opponent played a card that has 2 range here, and as you can see the range appear here. This one only has 1 range, so it doesn't appear. I'm going to restart and try to get the one that has armor. Okay, I finally got this card. So yeah, it's working. This one has 1 armor now. Now there's a problem here. So yeah, here I should hide this one because now I'm not using this. I'm using the new prefab. So this one was just appearing in the background without anything and it was kind of bugging. But now I just hide it and now it should be fine. Yeah, now it doesn't appear anymore. Okay, so now we have a working and displaying armor and range. But if you probably notice, the stat only appeared on the board and not on the focus on the card. So if I highlight this one, I can see on the board, but on the left side, on the zoom in version, it's not showing. So we're going to need to add it there too. Okay, so the other 2 prefab that we want to change to add those stats. One is the card UI, that's the one that appear in most of the menu and also the one that appear in big here. And then you have the end card. I'm going to open this prefab and then just do the same thing that I did in the other prefab. So I'm going to duplicate this range icon and then range. I'm going to move it up a bit, reduce the size, so make this font smaller. And then if you click on the root object, if you check out the script, this one is also using the same script, so you don't need to edit the script again, you just need to relink the new elements. And then same thing for the armor. Maybe for the armor I'm just going to go into the board card and then copy paste it. So Control C, going back to the end card, Control V. Now it's a bit far from the origin, so I'm just going to write 0. And it's also, the scale is a bit messed up, so I'm going to set it back to 1. Now it should appear here. Going to move it right here and then link it again to the card UI. So the armor and then the armor icon. Now it should be working for the card in hand, but I also want to show it in the UI, so I'm going to do the same thing here. So to do that, I'm just going to copy all this. I can also put this one inside. Just going to copy this one, card UI, and then paste it here. Now again, sometimes you will get some weird values here, so you can just put 0 and then just move it here. It's a bit small, but you can make it bigger for this one if you want to. but for now I'm just going to leave it like this. First, before we test, we're going to go back into card UI and then link all the fields here. So the range icon, range, then same thing for armor icon, and then armor. I think I actually changed the wrong prefab, because if you remember, I created a new one here and I changed the wrong one. So we're just going to revert this and then going to change this. Okay, remember to link things again. Okay, and then in the original prefab, I'm just going to revert this back. And then in the board card, I forgot to put back the ability button here. So now it should work much better. Yeah, so now I can see the range on this card. I can also see it on the hover, and it should appear on the board. Okay, so now we have fully functional range and armor. The only problem that we have right now is that those stats are static. They are just set on the scriptable object themselves. So it will be impossible for card abilities to affect their value and change them during the game. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is how to do that. And the way that you will want to do this is by also adding the field inside card.cs. So as you can see right now, you have these three basic stats, but you don't have the range. So I'm just going to go and also add the range. You can set the default value if you want. And then you should see a function that set the card. So basically what this does is that it takes the card data and then assign it to this card. So we're just going to initialize it with the default value from the scriptable object. And I think this is called whenever you place the card on the board. Now we're also going to add an ongoing bonus, because there are some abilities that need to be calculated in real time without affecting the current value. So I'm also going to add this one, and then there should be a function here, clean ongoing, that you will want to reset it to 0. So now if we go in card UI, now we set the value based on the card data, but we also want to update the value, the live value that has been edited and changes. So this one we're going to do it in this function instead, because this one update based on the card, and this function, if I click on find all references, it's called from the board card and the hand card. So not anything that is like just related to UI like this one, because the way it's made in the demos, that this one only shows the default value, the basic value of the card, so that when you hover on it, you know what are the base stats of the card before they have been changed. So now, as you can see in the update function, this one is also called, and this one will first set all the default value, but then after that it will set the one that have been updated. One thing we forgot in card.cs is to add a function get range, and we're just going to do the same than the other one. And if we go back to card UI, we're just going to add the live value here. This is the range, and then get range. Okay, and we're also going to change the armor, and this one is get trait value armor, and this one you don't need to assign it because it's already being assigned here in this function. So we're basically just adding the display field. Okay, so this is it to make the stat be able to be changed by abilities. And if we want to test that, I think we're going to need to create an actual abilities that change this. So we're going to go into abilities. Then I'm going to add on play ability. I'm just going to copy one of those. And then play armor 1. So this one, armor 1, going to be on play. And then you're going to select a target, any target that is not yourself. and you're going to we're going to need to create a new effect. So if I go in resources effect, I'm going to duplicate one that has the custom stat effect, add custom stats. I'm going to duplicate this one, and then this one going to be the armor, and then I can change it here for armor. So this effect already exists, so we don't need to change a script. Just going to go back to the ability. This is our new effect. We don't need a second effect. We also don't need a status. I'm just going to set the value to 1, so it's going to add 1 armor. And then everything else should be good. Just going to change the text. And now I'm also going to create an ongoing ability that increases the range. So I can just copy something here. Let's call it aura range. Going to be an ongoing ability for all the allied cards, but it doesn't need to be a wolf, just all the characters. And then this one I will need a new effect. So we're going to create the effect add stat, because it's a basic stat, not a custom stat. And I'm going to call it add range. Well, as you can see here, the range is not there, so we're going to need to go and edit the script. But first, I'm just going to finish doing the ability. So this was the effect we want to link here. Value of 1, so we're adding 1 range to all the cards on the board that are allied to you. And then just changing the text. All other ally gain +1 range. Now I'm going to link those ability to some cards that are easy to test. So maybe if I go in this card, going to add the ability armor, and then for the imp I'm going to add the range aura. And let's not forget that we didn't edit this script, so we're going to open this. And then we're going to go at the end here and add range in the enum with a different number. By the way, this is the number that is saved on the file in the scriptable object, so it doesn't save the text. That's why I set a number, so that we make sure that this is not like set randomly by Unity and that it's always the same, so it doesn't break our save file. And then everywhere that we're affecting a card, so in these two functions, I'm going to add the new stat. Okay, range. So the range is added to the value, but now we also want this to work for ongoing abilities. And then instead of range, it will be the range ongoing bonus. So I explained this in another video, but basically every time ongoing abilities are recalculated, all these values are reset to 0 and then recalculated every time the state change. So that's how ongoing abilities work. And now if I go back to effects and then add range, I'm going to change this to range here. So now we can try and test this. Hopefully I've set up everything correctly. Okay, so this one has the ability add armor, but there's no other card, so I'm going to put this first, and then next turn I will try this card. Okay, play this, and then I can select a target. I'm going to select this one. So it's showing here, but it's not showing on the card. So I'm going to go back, and I think I know why. It's because the icon and the text is disabled. So we really need to move this here. So all of this, I'm going to move it to this function instead. Actually, I should leave it also there, because all the UI card I also want it to work, but for board card, then I need to change it. So let's copy this and this. And then instead it will be this here. because this one was for the card data and not for the card. Another thing that we will need to change is when we, if I remember right, inside the condition, the attack condition, here I'm looking at the card data range. So this is important that we change it to just the get range instead, so that it uses the updated value and not the initial value. We want to make sure that we change it everywhere. We can also just right click here and then find all reference. So if I go, this is correct. This one here, I'm going to change it to get range because this one doesn't include the ongoing value. This should be good. So now let's try. Let's play this one. Okay, so now I will add the armor. Select this, and now it's up here. Now it's working correctly. The range will also work, but I don't have the right card, so I'm just going to restart. And when I play this one, they should all gain 2 range. And now it will be easy to test because it's exactly 2 range. So now I can attack. Let's play this. Now they both have 2 range, so now I should be able to attack this. Great, this is working. And then this one I should be able to gain 1 armor. So now that we've managed to create new stats for our cards, the last thing I want to show you in this video is how to create a new card type. And for this example, we're going to create a kind of card that is an arena that is placed maybe in the middle of the board and that affects everyone. And then when another one is played, then it's replace a previous one. So a bit like the arena in the Pokemon card games, where there can only be one at a time, and then it's affecting the whole board, not just yourself. So first I'm going to go in my game scene, and then I'm going to remove what I did previously. Just delete this, and then we're going to move this one up, and this is going to be our slot for the arena. I'm going to change the type here. Maybe I'm just going to use a fixed one for this, because anyone can play on it, and we don't really need to say that it belongs to any player. But even if I put that, I will still need to go in the code and change a bit the logic, because right now I think this will just always leave this to 0 no matter which side I am playing on. So when it's here, this means if I'm player 0, then this will be player 0, but if I'm player number 1, then this will be player 1, and this is just doing the opposite. So that's why by default they are placed like that, so that it's kind of reverse the board. So that's what it's doing. But fixed, it doesn't reverse anything, it just keeps always the same stat. So if I go into card data, probably the first one I would want to change is just add a type here. Going to add arena. We're just going to create some test cards. If I go in the test deck, I will actually change all the town to be arena now. So let's add the other town. Make it easier to test, and then we're going to select all the town. So this, and this, change this to arena. And now if I go in the scripts, I will need to define the logic for this type of card in both game and game logic. First thing that I will want to change, going to go in card data, and then there's a function here called isBoardCard. I'm also going to add the arena here because they are also on the board. If you want some help navigating in the code, so one thing that you could do is just like find all reference of the artifacts and kind of help you know where all the place that you should change when adding a new type. I use the artifact because this is the closest. This one here is for the filters in the collection panel for the deck building. We're not going to change this for now, but I'm going to look at all the places where it's actually game logic. So same as artifacts, I don't want the arena to move. going to return false. So the only thing I can do is play it, and it will only be able to be played on the last one that is set to 6. So same as artifacts, I'm going to write it. And I'm going to remove this condition because now I want artifacts to be played normally like characters on the others. The last one is really reserved for the arena. Now there's a problem here, is that there's a condition here that prevents you from playing it on the other side, but when it's an arena, there's no other side. So this condition should only be checked if it's not an arena. So I'm going to add this here. Because the side doesn't really matter, everyone tries to play on the one that is kind of like in the middle. Also the arena, if there's already a card on it, it can just replace it. So we're just going to remove this card on slot and do the same, something similar here. Also only check this if it's not an arena. And remove it here. Everything else seems good to me. Now I'm going to go in the game logic and find play card, and here we're going to do something different when it's an arena. So I think actually this is fine for arena. I think it will work well because I've already changed its board card, so it should be fine actually, because now that we changed the condition, both players should be able to play there. The only thing that we need to change is discard the card if there's already one, because now we remove that condition here. So I'm just going to add something here that says discard previous one, and then I'm going to access it, get slot card. So this is the slot where we're trying to play our card, and then if this is not null, then we just discard it. Another problem that I can see right now before we try it is that the opponent AI will try to play the card on his side, but right now we only have one and it's the same for both. So since myself I'm dragging the card directly on this one, it shouldn't be a problem, but for the AI I think we will need to change something. So I'm going to go check the AI code quickly just to make sure that it's able to play there. AI logic, going to search for play card. So this is where it defines which action are possible. So yeah, the problem is that the AI right now is trying to check only for empty slot on its own side, but then if the card is an arena, then instead we're just going to say this is where it goes. So the AI don't need to check so many different slots that are just not valid. So the arena one is always 610. So the first one is the X value, the second one is the Y value that we set here, and then the last one is the player ID. So usually slots are assigned to each different player, so you have 0 or 1, but since we only have one right now, they both play on the 0 value. That's why I set fix here. So I'm going to test. Hopefully it does it at some point. And the AI just played to replace mine. So now it seems that everything is working. And now the last thing that you probably will want to do is to just change the town abilities so that these three, so that they affect everyone and not just allies. So you could just remove this one, and now it will affect everyone on the board instead of just your own card. So I think that covers everything for this tutorial. I hope it was really helpful to you, and see you in the next one.